Hello and welcome to my channel CBSE Simplified. My name is Anupam Mishra and today we are going to discuss this chapter. The name of the chapter is, this is the first chapter of the class 8th English NCERT book. The name of the textbook is Honeydew and this is the first chapter. Name of the chapter is The Best Christmas Present in the World. And before we actually start this chapter, let us just discuss a few points which are given in the beginning of the chapter so that we understand as to what this chapter is all about. So before you read, there are some dates or periods of time in the history of the world that are so significant that everyone knows and remembers them. So this chapter is actually talks about a story written by a writer. We will talk about the writer also towards the end of the story. And this story is set during the World War I, which took place around in 1914. And there are some dates in what the writer says, that there are some dates in the history which are very significant and which are very, very important. And they are so important and so significant that everyone in the world knows about these dates, and they also know as to what has happened on these particular dates. So the story you will read mentions one such date and an event, and the year was 1940, and like I said, this year signifies the World War I, which was fought between the Britishers and other countries also. So, and can you guess which war it was? Like I said, in 1940, it was the beginning of World War I. Do you know which events the dates below refer to? So the writer has given some dates here and he's asking a question: do you know anything about these dates, and do you know why these dates are significant and what has happened on these particular dates, and why the writer has mentioned these dates? So the first date is 4th July 1776. See, this date is very important in the history of the United States. This is the date on which America got freedom from the British. So 4th of July is actually the Independence Day, which is celebrated in America. 17 December 1903. This was the date on which I'm sure that you must have heard the name of Wright brothers. They were the first one to fly an aircraft. So this date, on this particular day, this achievement was made. 6th August 1945 was the date on which America dropped atomic bomb on Nagasaki, city of Japan. We already know it. 30th January 1948 is the date on which Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated. 12 April 1961 was the date on which Yuri Gagarin became the first person to go in the space, and so on and so forth. So answers are already given. I just gave you a brief idea about how these dates are significant and what is the importance of these dates. So let us begin the story. I spotted it in a junk shop in Bridport, a roll-top desk. The man said it was early 19th century, an oak. I had wanted one, but that were far too expensive. This one was in a bad condition, the roll top in several pieces, one leg clumsily mended, scorch marks all down one side. It was going for very little money. I thought I could restore it. So the writer says that he was looking for some kind of furniture and in a junk shop, and the junk shop was located in Bridport. Bridport is the name of a place. So he was looking for a table, and there he found a table, and the table it belonged to 19th century. So we can understand it was an old table made of some kind of oak. Oak is the name of a tree. And he said he actually wanted to buy a table, but the table which he wanted to buy, it was very expensive. But this table which he noticed there at the junk shop at Bridport, though it was in bad condition, but it was a cheap one. So the writer thought, so the person thought, okay, even if this table is in bad condition, I'm going to buy it. It has some scorch marks all over the place. It was spotted. The one leg was it was going in one direction, the other leg was going in some other direction, but the writer thought, okay, he will be able to take care of it, and he will be able to mend it, and he will be able to restore the table also. So he took a risk. He says it would be a risk, a challenge, but I had to have it. So since the writer always wanted to buy this table, so he paid the money he took this table and he took this table to his home, because he was very confident that he will be able to take care of the table and he will be able to restore it to its previous condition. So I paid the man and brought it back to my workroom at the backstage of a garage. I began to work on it on the Christmas Eve. As the title of the story says, the best Christmas present. So what this man did, he paid the money and he bought this table and he brought it back to his home and started repairing it. And what was the day? It was Christmas Eve. On which day Christmas Eve is observed? It is on 24th of December. That means just one day before the actual Christmas day. So what he did, I removed the roll top completely and pulled out the drawers. So he removed the upper thin layer of the plastic from the table and he pulled out the drawer. The table was such, it had drawers. So the veneer had lifted almost everywhere. Veneer is actually a protective layer. It could be made of plastic or some kind of other material also, which is put on the top of the table. So he noticed that the upper layer of the table was torn from everywhere. It looked like water damage to me. It looked like that the table was damaged because of water. Both fire and water had clearly taken their toll on this desk. So he imagined that the table was completely destroyed or damaged just because of either fire or it was because of water. The last drawer was stuck fast, so the table had some drawers. When he tried to open it, he was not able to open it because it was stuck. It was very tightly shut, so he was not able to open it. So what he did, I tried all I could to ease it out gently. He tried to pull it out, and later on he was able to pull the drawer. In the end, I used a brute force. So with a heavy stroke, he was able to pull the drawer outside, and he was able to open it. I struck it sharply with the side of my fist, and the drawer flew open to reveal a shallow space underneath, a secret drawer. So when he opened the drawer, what he found, as you can see in this picture, this is the man who actually bought this table, and this is the tabletop, and there you see there are some drawers. So when he tried to open the last drawer, it was not opening. So he tried it very hard, and suddenly the drawer got opened. So when the drawer was opened, he was very much surprised to see that inside the drawer there was another secret drawer. And inside that secret drawer there was a tin box. As you can see, this black color box, and you see the expression of this man. He was very much surprised to see this box. So there was something in there. I reached in and took out a small box. It was a black color tin box. Sellotaped to the side of it was a piece of lined note paper, and written on it in shaky handwriting, Jim's last letter received on January 25th, 2015. So in this tin box there was a letter, and it was actually written, and it was written in a shaky handwriting. It seemed like someone who was very old in age must have written this letter, and this letter belonged to some person whose name was Jim, and it was his last letter, and there was a date mentioned on the letter. The date was January 25th, 1915. And just remember, it was the time when the World War first was being fought between United States and Britain and other countries also. So what was the date mentioned on the letter? January 25th, 1950. To be buried with me when the time comes. And it was mentioned on the letter that letter should be buried with the person whenever the time comes. The letter should be buried under the ground with the person to whom this letter belonged to. So this person says, I knew as I did it that it was wrong of me to open the box. So he thought for a moment, and he said it will not be good for him to open this box and read the letter, which actually did not belong to him. It belonged to somebody else. But what he did, curiosity got the better of my scruples, and it usually does. So though he was quite hesitant, he did not want to open the letter and did not want to read the letter which did not belong to him. But he thought, okay, it will be, since no one was there, no one was aware of what was going on. He was all alone. So he thought, if he reads the letter, there is no harm in it. So he can definitely read the letter. There is no one who is going to blame for anything. So inside the box there was an envelope. So he opened the box and he found there was an envelope, and on that envelope there was an address. The address was Mrs. Jim Macpherson, 12 Copper Beaches, Bridport, and Dorset is the name of the place. So what I did, I took out the letter and unfolded it, and it was written in pencil and dated at the top December 26, 1914. So this was the address which was mentioned on the envelope, and when he opened the letter was written in pencil, and there was a date mentioned on the letter. On the date, what was the date on the letter? December 26, 1914. It was the date on which the letter was received. Now here these lines tell us as to what was written in the letter. So the writer is reading the letter for us. Dearest Connie, Connie is the name of a woman. I write you in the much happier frame of mind because something wonderful has just happened that I must tell you about at once. So this person is writing a letter to someone who is a female, and we will talk about this later on. And he says, I am very much happy when I am writing this letter. You can imagine I am very, very happy. I am in a happy frame of mind. And just because, why? Because something very wonderful has happened to me, and I cannot stop from telling it to you, and I should discuss it with you also. So what he says, we were all standing in our trenches yesterday morning, Christmas morning, and it was crisp and quite all about, as beautiful a morning as I have ever seen, as cold as frosty as the Christmas morning should be. So we can understand Christmas is the time when the atmosphere is very cold, when the weather is extremely cold. So he says, what we were doing, see, this story is written in the backdrop of World War II, when the forces of Britain and Germany, they were fighting against each other. So this person was actually an army man. He writes his letter to his wife, and he says, you won't believe, it was the Christmas morning, and everything was very beautiful. The morning was very beautiful, and I have never ever seen such a beautiful morning in my life. And how was the weather? It was very cold and frosty. Frost means there was a kind of a snowfall on that particular day, and the weather was very, very cold. And I should like to be able to tell you that we begin it, but the truth, I am ashamed to say, is that Fritz began it. See, Fritz, actually it's a name, and it is a name which is a very common name in Germany. You can say, like in India, Ram and Shyam, these are very, very common names here. All right. So similarly, Fritz is a very common name in Germany. So Fritz is a name in this story. Fritz is a name which is given to all the German soldiers. And next we will come across another name which is Tommy. Tommy is actually a very common name in Britain. So the British soldiers are referred to here as Tommy, and the German soldiers are referred to as Fritz. So he says, I'm very much surprised, and I should be telling it to you, and you will not believe it. But whatever I'm going to tell you, it's absolutely true. So we did not start it. It was actually started by the German soldier, and what they did. First, someone saw a wet white flag waving from the trenches opposite, and they were calling out to us from across no man's land, Happy Christmas, Tommy, Happy Christmas. So what was happening? You can imagine. I'll show you a picture just below it. There is a picture. Let's see. See, this is the picture, and this is actually the no man's land. And if you have gone any border area like India and Pakistan border, if you have gone there, you must have seen this kind of arrangement wherein there is a certain area of land wherein no one can enter. It is called no man's land or zero line. So on one side you see soldiers of one country are standing, and on the other side you see the soldiers of other country are standing. So on one side there are the soldiers of Germany, on the other side there are the soldiers of British or Britain, and this part is called zero line or no man's land. So what it says, when we were just enjoying the weather, all of a sudden we heard something. What had happened? The soldiers from the German soldier, they started calling us. They were lying in the trenches. Trenches are actually deep ditches which are made inside the ground during the war, so that these soldiers can actually protect them from their enemies. So they started calling out. They started calling us. They started wishing us Merry Christmas and Merry Christmas, Tommy. And like I said, Tommy is the name, which is a very common name in Britain. So the writer is referring it to British soldiers. So when we had got over the surprise, some of us shouted back, "Same to you, Fritz, same to you." And though that would be that, we all did. But then suddenly one of them was up there in his great coat and waving a white flag. So what they did, see, white flag is during the war, if you raise a white flag, it's an indication that you want you are looking for some kind of treaty or peace. You do not want to fight. So you actually want to cross each other's borders, and you just want to meet the enemies. So if you raise a white flag, it means you just want to surrender, or you want to talk to your enemies so that they do not open fire on you. So what they noticed, some of the soldiers from Germany, the German soldiers, they were raising some white flags. So it was an indication that they did not want any kind of firing. And they said it, "Do not shoot, lads." Someone shouted, and no one did. But there was another Fritz up on the parapet, and another, "Keep your heads down." I told the man, "It's a trick," but it wasn't. So the American soldiers thought, when they started raising this white flag, the British soldier thought it might be a trick, but it was not actually a trick. They actually wanted to meet the British soldiers. That is the reason they raised the white flag, because they wanted no one should fire, because perhaps they wanted to celebrate this Christmas festival all together. So one of the Germans was waving a bottle above his head. "It's a Christmas day, Tommy, and we have schnapps. We have sauces. We meet you." Yes. By this time, there were dozens of them walking towards us across no man's land, and not a rifle between them. So all of a sudden, they noticed the German soldiers started walking towards the British soldier. They crossed the zero line, the no man's land they crossed. And what they were carrying, to their surprise, they were carrying the bottles of wine and sausages, and there were several items of eating also. They wanted to actually share their food, whatever they were carrying. And the best part was, they were raising a white flag, and they did not have any kind of rifles or any kind of things with them. Little Private Morris was the first up. "Come on, boys, what are we waiting for?" And then there was no stopping them, and I was the officer. I should have stopped them there and then, I suppose, but the truth is that it never ever occurred to me that I should. So this man who has written this letter was actually an army person, and he was the officer in charge. He thought he should not let anyone do this kind of activity, because it is not allowed during the war. You cannot go ahead and shake hands or share your food with your enemies, because they are your enemies. You are supposed to fight with them. You are not supposed to shake hands and share the bottle of wine or food with them. So this man thought, since he was the officer in charge, he thought to himself that he should stop everything there. But he said, "I was not able to do it, because it was the first time in my life I had ever seen this kind of thing at the borderline, where the soldiers were actually fighting against each other, and they were killing each other." So all along their line and ours, I could see men walking slowly towards one another, grey coats, khaki coats meeting in the middle, and I was one of them. I was a part of it. In the middle of the war, we were making peace. So what happened there? These soldiers started walking towards the no man's land, and they were wearing their own dress. They were wearing great colored coats and khaki pants and all this. And he says, I was very much surprised, and soon after, in a few minutes, all of them, they actually came, and they were standing in the middle of the war. And they were not carrying any kind of arms. They were not carrying any kind of rifles or bullets. They were all empty-handed. Only thing that they were carrying were the bottle of wines, their food, sausages, and pastries and cakes and all those things. He says, "You can't imagine, dearest Connie, my feelings as I looked into the eyes of the Fritz officer who approached me, hand outstretched, and he says to his wife, 'Dearest Connie, you will not believe how I was feeling at that point of time when I looked at these officers from Germany who shook hand with me. I was speechless. Hans Wolf,' he said, gripping my hand warmly and holding it, 'I am from Dusseldorf, and I play the cello in the orchestra. Happy Christmas.'" He said, okay, this German soldier introduced himself, and he says, "My name is Hans Wolf, and I actually play cello in the orchestra." Cello is a kind of a musical instrument, like a violin. It looks like it's very similar to a violin. So he says, "See, I am a violinist, and I belong to Dusseldorf, is a place in Germany, and I am a musician. I play a musical instrument in the orchestra, and I want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Who says this? The German soldier. Captain Jim McPherson. Who was Jim McPherson? The officer in charge of the British Army. He said, my name is Jim McPherson, and a happy Christmas to you. And I'm a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England. He says I am actually a school teacher, though I'm a part of British Army, but actually I'm a school teacher and I belong to Dorset, and Dorset is in the west of England. Oh, Dorset. He smiled. I know this place. I know it very well. We shared my rum ration and an excellent sausage. We talked, Connie, how we talked. He spoke almost perfect English, but it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset, never even been to England. So what happened? All these soldiers from the British Army and the German Army, they came together. They stood in the middle of the no man's land, and they actually shared and exchanged their food, and they started talking to each other. They started celebrating Christmas. You can understand it was the occasion of Christmas. So they were all very happy. Christmas is one of the biggest religion in the world. I'm sure that you know it. There are more than 150 countries in the world who actually follow Christianity. So it's the largest religion in the world. So he says to his wife, Connie, you will not believe that being a German, he spoke perfect English. And later on, I came to know that he had never gone to England. All he was telling was perhaps a lie. He never went to England. He never went to Dorset. All he had learned all he knew of England from school and from reading books in English. So whatever he knew about England, he had read everything in the books only, in the textbooks from the school only. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was a very famous British writer, and his favorite book was Far From Madding Crowd. It was the name of the book, which was written by Thomas Hardy, and Thomas Hardy was a British writer. So out there in the no man's land, we talked of Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak and Sergeant Troy and Dorset. So they talked about many things. They talked about different places, different people, Sergeant Troy and Dorset and everything they talked about. He had a wife and one son born just 6 months ago, and when this man, Mr. Jim, who was a British soldier, came to know that the other person whom he was talking with, he had a wife and he had a son, and his son was only 6 months old. So as I looked about me, there were huddles of khaki and grey everywhere, all over no man's land, smoking, laughing, talking, drinking and eating. So all were enjoying. They were very happy. So in the backdrop of the war, when the soldiers were fighting against each other, they were firing bullets on each other, they were killing each other, they were destroying the property and burning everything. During that war, these soldiers from Britain and Germany, they were actually celebrating Christmas all together. They have forgotten each and everything in this world, and they forgot that they were actually enemies. They were talking to each other, they were laughing, they were drinking, they were eating, they were just enjoying their life. So Hans Wolf and I shared what was left of a wonderful Christmas cake. Connie, I thought the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. So they also had brought a Christmas cake, so they shared the cake, and he said the marzipan is nothing, it's just a outer layer of a cake made of sugar and all those things. So he said marzipan was the best thing that he had ever tasted in his life. I agreed. We agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. There never was such a Christmas party like it. So he says, even though we were enemies, the British and the German people, they were enemies during that World War I. But he says, even in spite of that fact, we forgot everything and we were actually celebrating our Christmas day, and we were very, very, very happy. So then someone, I don't know who, brought out a football. The grey coats were dumped in piles to make the goal post, and the next thing we knew, it was Tommy against Frizz out in the middle of no man's land. So after their party was over, someone took out a football and they started playing the football. So what they did, they removed their coats and used those courts to make a goal post. As you can see in the game of football, there are goal posts on either side of the ground, and the players have to pass the ball into the goal post. So very soon, the no man's land became a football ground, and they started playing football against each other. Hans Wolf and I looked on and cheered and clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. So This man whose name was Hans Wolff, who was a German officer, and this Mr. Macpherson, who was a British officer, they started looking at this match. They started enjoying this match. They cheered their team, and they were clapping their hands, and they were actually encouraging, supporting their team. So there was a moment when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. So soon they realized that they were actually, the atmosphere was filled with joy, and everyone was enjoying. I saw it too and smiled. Miss Jim Macpherson, he said after a while, I think this is how we should resolve this war. A football match, no one dies in a football match, no children are orphaned, no wives become widows. See, this is the irony. Irony means the opposite things, virodhabhas. See, it is not the general public or general people who fight against each other. It's actually the nations, and the nations are controlled by the bureaucrats and the politicians, the policy makers. He says, one of the persons says, look, what I think is that that should not be whenever the war happens between the countries, it only destroys, it kills men, it destroys properties, it destroys everything. So what is the best way to resolve the war is a football match, because in football match no one dies, children are not orphaned, and people are not killed. He said, I would prefer cricket. See, in England, cricket is the most popular game. So he said, no, I prefer to play cricket. Then Thomas could be sure of winning, probably. He laughed at and together we watched the games. He said, no, I always prefer the game of cricket, because we know British England has a great cricket team. So he says if we play a cricket match, and I'm sure we will be able to win the match. So you see this picture, the game is going on. One army is wearing one kind of dress, other armies wearing some other kind of dress, and you see these are the German soldiers, because you see a swastika kind of sign on their dresses. So see, these are German people and these are British people. Connie Frizz won 2-1, but as Hans Wolff generously said, our goal was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. So ultimately what happened at the end of the match, the German team won by 2 goals as compared to 1 goal that was goal by the British team. But they accepted that there was something which happened during the match. It was not actually fair. He explained as to how they were able to win the match. And the time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished, the schnapps and the rum and the sausage had long since run out, and viewing that it was all over, I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family soon, that the fighting would end and we could all go home. So after the match was over, they shook hands with each other. All of their food was over. They had eaten almost everything. They drank rum, sausages, all kind of food, cake, and everything was enjoyed very much. So ultimately they shook hands with each other, and they said to each other, when the war is open, very soon we will meet, and we will call the families, and we will have a great time later on. So I think this is what every soldier wants on both sides. Hans Wolff said, take care, Jim Macpherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you. He saluted and walked away from me slowly. Unwillingly, I felt he turned to wave just one, and then became one of the hundreds of grey-coated men drifting back towards their trenches. So after this match was over, and he said, okay, what I feel is that everyone on my side, on the other side of the fence, we do not want any kind of war. All we want is silence. All we want is peace. So what he did, he shook hand and he just went back to his place. He did not look back. He just went back to his place. So that night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing carols, singing it quite beautifully. It was still Nacht. It's a German word which in English means silent night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of Wild Shepherd watched. We exchanged carols for a while, and then we all fell silent. We had our time of peace and goodwill, a time I will treasure as long as I live. So during the night, what happened? It was perhaps the evening time when they played the game. During the night, they started singing songs to celebrate Christmas. The British soldiers, they sang the song White Shepherd watched, and the German soldiers, they sang the song Still Night. And after their songs were exchanged, and everyone was very happy, and the writer says, I will never ever forget this moment, and this was perhaps the best ever moment that I have ever lived in my life. Dearest Connie, by Christmas next time, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. I know from all that what happened today, how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon. I am sure of it. Your loving, John. So he says to his wife, dearest Connie, you don't even know what kind of feeling we had. We all know that these wars are nothing. After some time we will forget each and everything. So whatever happened today, it was like a most memorable day in my life, and I will always remember this day in my life. What I can conclude is that we do not want any kind of war. So we shall stay together, and I am sure one day the war will end, and here the letter ends. Now this is the third part of the story. What he did, I folded the letter again, slipped it carefully back into its envelope. I kept awake all night. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I drove into Bridport, just a few miles away. I asked a boy walking his dog where Copper Beach was. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burned out shell, the roof gaping, the windows boarded up. So what he did, he read this letter and he decided that he will find out this woman to whom this letter was written, and the name of the woman was Connie. So next day he started searching for this lady, and he already had this address in his mind. Their house number was 12. So when he reached this place, he found the house it was a very old house. The windows were broadened up. Everything was destroyed. It looked like the house had already been burned. So I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of Mrs. Macpherson. So I asked a neighbor there if they knew anything about Mrs. Macpherson, who was still alive. To his surprise, this lady was still alive, you see. Oh yes, said the old man in his slippers. He knew her well, a lovely old lady. He told me, a bit muddle-headed, but at her age she might be entitled to be. So he said, no, I know this lady, don't worry. I know that lady is in the hospital, and she has gone crazy. She has become a little bit disturbed. Why? Because she was very old, and she was more than 100 years old, and she says it's okay to be in the state of confusion if you are as old as 101 years old. 101 years old, she had been in the house when it got fire. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. She used candles rather than electricity. So he says, you see the condition of this house. This house has been burned, and this lady has become crazy. She has already been 101 years old, and this house got burned. Why this house got burned? Because we have never seen her using the bulbs, the electricity. She always used the candles, and because of the candles, her house got fire. So because she always thought electricity was too expensive. Why she used to use candles, not the electricity? Because this lady always thought that electricity was very expensive. The fireman had got her just in time. She was in a nursing home now, and he told me Burlington House on the Dorchester Road on the other side of the town. And he said, no, I know this woman. This woman is in the hospital, and the hospital is situated on Dorchester Road, and the name of the house is Burlington House. So the writer immediately decided to find this lady. I found the Burlington House nursing home easily enough, and there were paper chains up in the hallway, and lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner with the lopsided angle on the top. So when he reached this nursing home, the name of the nursing home was Burlington House Nursing Home. When he reached there, and when he was going through the gallery, the corridor, he looked on both sides of the corridor. There were a lot of Christmas trees, and there were a lot of gifts and all those things which were lined up there. So I said, I was a friend come to visit Mrs. Macpherson to bring her a Christmas present. When someone asked as to why have you come here, whom you want to meet, what is the purpose of you coming here, then he said, okay, I want to meet Mrs. Macpherson. I am her friend, and I want to give her a Christmas present. So I could see through into her dining room, where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. The matron had hat on too, and seemed happy enough to see me. If you see this picture, you will see the whole story. See, this is the lady that we are talking about, Mrs. Macpherson. She has become 100-year-old. Look the kind of hair. She is extremely cold. Her body has wrinkled, and she is sitting on a wheelchair. And this is the man who actually found the letter and that box. He comes to this hospital because he wanted to give this box to this lady. So, and that was on what was the day? It was a day of Christmas. So when this lady meets this person, she was very happy. She even offered me a mince pie. She walked me along the corridor. Mrs. Macpherson is not with others. She told me she is rather confused today, so we thought it is best if she had a good rest. She has no family, no one visits, so I'm sure she will be only too pleased to see you. She took me into the conservatory with wicker chairs and potted plants all around and left me. So there was a lady in the hospital and she says, okay, see, the condition of Mrs. Macpherson is not good. She lives all alone. Her husband is dead and she does not recognize anyone. But we thought since today is Christmas, so she also must be in the position to celebrate Christmas. So we have put her at a place wherein she can actually enjoy this festival and make herself very, very happy. So you can go there and you can meet her. So the old lady was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun. Wispy bun, you see the condition of this hair. किस तरह के ये hair दिखाई पड़ रहे हैं, इसको wispy bun बोलते हैं. Bun in Hindi is called juda. So you see this lady, I already described the condition of this lady. She was gazing out at the garden. Hello, I said. She turned out and looked up at me vacantly. Happy Christmas, Connie. I went on. I found this. I think it is yours. He said, okay, I have come to meet you. Connie is the name of this lady. This man says, Connie, I've just come here to meet you and I've got a very wonderful gift for you and I just want to say Merry Christmas. As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. And that was the moment her lips lit up with recognition and her face became suffused with the sudden glow of happiness. When she looked at this box, she became extremely happy. Though she had lost her mind, she had lost everything. She had lost her house and her husband also. But the moment she saw this tin box in the writer's hand, she says she was extremely very happy. She was very, very happy. I explained about the desk, about how I had found, but I don't think she was listening. He started explaining as to how he was able to find that box, but he realized later on the lady was not listening to anything. He was just looking at this man. She said nothing but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. The lady did not say anything at all. She just took this letter from the hand of the writer and just kept it with her. Suddenly, she reached out and took my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. You told me you have come home by Christmas, dearest, she said, and here you are. The best Christmas present in the world. Come closer, Jim dear, sit down. So what has happened? See, there is a twist in the story. And we have almost come to the conclusion of the story. The story is about to end in a minute or two. Those who have not subscribed this channel, I request them to just watch these videos carefully. And if you have any suggestions or any kind of opinion, please let me know through the comments. Subscribe this channel and let's continue with it. So what has happened there? The lady thought it was actually her husband who had lost his life during the war, who never came back to meet this lady. She was actually very much confused. She had no idea that the person whom she was talking about was not her husband. But the lady thought she was so lost, she was so confused that she thought that her husband has come back. So that is why she addresses this man as Jim Macpherson, and he says, okay, you promised me that you will come back to me on the day of Christmas, and today's Christmas, and you have come back. I have missed you so much. And the writer he says he was very much confused because the lady was very much confused already. I sat beside her. She kissed my cheek. I read your letters so often, Jim, every day. I wanted to hear your voice in my head. It always made me feel you were with me, and now you are. Now you are back. You can read it to me yourself. Would you do that for me, Jim dear? I just want to hear your voice again. I would love that so much. And then perhaps we will have some tea. I have made a very nice Christmas cake. Marzipan all around. You know how much you love marzipan. And the lady kept on talking. And she said, okay, now you have kept your promise. Understand, the lady mistakenly thought that this man was her lost husband Jim. And she says, okay, now since you have come back, I request you to just read this letter, because it's been a long time. It has been many years. I have not heard your voice, so please go ahead and read this letter in your voice. Now we have come back. Now I think that we can spend some more time. Today is a very auspicious day. Today is Christmas. I just want to hear your voice, and please promise me that you will not go from here again, you will not leave me again. I love you so much, and I have prepared some Christmas cake for you, and I know it very well that how much you love the Christmas cake, and I know we can have some good time, we can have some tea. The lady kept on talking and talking, and here the story ends. The name of the writer is Michael Morpurgo. He's the person who wrote this letter, wrote this story. How did you like this story? How did you like the explanation? Please let me know about this. Please subscribe my channel, and those who have already subscribed, I'm very grateful to them. Thank you for watching, and you have a nice day.